Since it's hunting season across the nation, lots of questions are rolling in about hunting, about tree stands, deer processing, processing equipment, butcher knives, etc. So instead of answering all of these in the Q&A session, I'm going to do a little segment here on the meat cutting equipment that I use and pass on a few recommendations. Now, most of the people watching channels like mine are interested in homesteading, living more self-sufficient, having a little farm, that sort of thing. So you don't have to be a hunter to take advantage of this information, okay? If you're raising a few animals, or even if you just want to be frugal and cut your grocery bill a little bit, buying a big chunk of meat, then cutting it down into smaller portions will save you some money. So having a little bit of meat cutting equipment on hand, even just a grinder, will pay for itself over time. Now, if you're going to do any degree of meat cutting, don't go cheap with your grinder. Okay, this is a one-horse grinder. It's made by the LEM company here. I've had this grinder now for probably 20 years or so. It is a fantastic grinder. Prior to this, I had one of those small ones that you can buy for probably 69, 79 bucks. That thing was maddening. If you want to grind up just a few pieces of meat to make some sausage or something, occasionally that's fine. But if you're going to grind up a deer or a pig or something, forget it. I went from that to this. This is fantastic. Buying a grinder is an investment. You go cheap, you're going to get cheap, and it's not going to last. If you're going to be grinding meat, you're going to need some sort of a tray here for the grind to fall into. For many years I used like a plastic dish pan. I bought a few new ones. I kept them just for when I'm grinding meat. They work out okay. But then I found these trays at a restaurant supply store. They go in those buffet tables. These are fantastic. You want to get one that's low enough so it fits underneath your grinder here, and then the meat can spit right into it. Obviously, the stainless steel cleans up a lot better than the plastic does. And what I like about the stainless steel, it doesn't take on the aroma of all those sausage seasonings. When I was using the plastic trays, I'm mixing it up, and you wash the tray all out, and you could still smell all of that seasoning. So the stainless steel is the way to go. Just give you a little tip. If you're going to grind some meat, put it in the freezer, let it get partially frozen before you put it through the grinder. It gets stiffened up, it goes through the grinding plate a heck of a lot better. I really like the poly cutting boards. The one that I use the most is 2 foot by 3 foot, and you've seen this in a lot of my videos in the past. It's big enough to handle a large portion of meat, like the whole hind end of a deer. And when I'm cutting up pieces like a back strap, I have a good, large, clean surface to work off of. I'm going to put the link to that down below too. It is a very good investment when you're working with large pieces of meat, and then you have a pile that's going to be ground and a pile that might be used for stew meat or what have you. Now, of course, you're going to need a few boning knives. You can spend a fortune on them, but you don't have to. I'll put a few recommendations in the description below. I've showed these little knife sharpeners in the past. They're inexpensive. They do a fantastic job, because someone can put a really nice edge on the knife with little to no experience. But the secret to keeping the knife sharp is to just don't let them get dull. Have a honing rod. Use your knife for a bit. Give it a few licks on the honing rod. Keep that edge going. If you're cutting continuously down on bone, you'll start to lose your edge. On the honing rod, brings it back to life. If you don't do that and the knife gets dull, this little gadget right here, just a few licks on the blade like that, few passes on the honing rod, and you're back in business. If you're only cutting up a little bit of meat occasionally, well, you can buy a box or two of freezer paper in the grocery store. But if you're going to do this every year, maybe you're going to raise a few chickens or some other meat animal, or you're planning on putting a deer or two in the freezer every year, this is the way to go. So convenient. I cut up deer every year. This is the 15-inch paper. It's perfect size for my needs. I think this roll comes in 450-foot length or something like that. I've had this for a long time. Just set it down, rip off all the sections that I need. Works fantastic. This is well worth the investment. Before I put the meat in the freezer paper, I find it works best to put it in these cheap little flapper type sandwich bags first. Because if I put it right in the paper, I'm handling meat, then I'm handling the paper, and I'm getting that blood and stuff all over the paper. Forget about that. Put all the meat in the bags first, get it all done, get your hands cleaned up, then put it in the paper. It keeps all the packages of meat nice and clean. If you're going to be working with a large animal like a deer, having a nice meat saw like this can be a good investment. It's really not necessary, especially if you're boning out the animal, because what small amount of bone sawing you're going to do can be done with just a clean blade on a sawzall. Quite often folks ask me if I use any type of vacuum sealer, which I do. The one that I have is the Food Saver brand, Game Saver Wingman. It's even got the nifty camo. It's a fantastic item. I don't do all of the meat that I process in the vacuum sealer. The reason is I'm frugal, okay? I'm pretty cheap sometimes. And the benefit of this is it keeps the meat fresher longer. They claim 5 times longer. And there is a difference. If you have meat in the freezer for a year or better, you have a pack that was just double wrapped in the plastic and paper, and have a chunk of meat that was in a vacuum sealer and have them side by side, well, there is a difference. But if I only get one deer, I'll probably do maybe 2/3 of it just double wrapped with the freezer paper and the plastic, and then do the rest in the Food Saver. And then I save the vacuum sealed meat for what I reach for last. But the real benefit of having it vacuum sealed is when you're traveling. We've all seen it. You take a piece of frozen meat, it's wrapped up, you put it in your cooler, and as it thaws out, it starts to bleed and it leaks in your cooler. And it's a really big benefit if you're dealing with frozen fish. Having that fish juice in your cooler contaminates everything, okay? When it's in a vacuum sealer, you eliminate that problem altogether, which is a very, very big plus. If I get a couple of deer, maybe I'll do one deer just double wrapped with the plastic and the freezer paper, and all the rest of the meat will be done with the Food Saver, and that's what I reach for last, and it works out really good. Well worth the money. So that pretty much covers all of the equipment that I use to process all of my venison. The only thing that I didn't show was my hoist and gambrel. If you're going to be cutting up deer, this is a must-have. It makes raising that deer up a heck of a lot easier than simply throwing a rope up over a branch. Now I'm going to put links to all of the equipment that I use in the description below. You don't have to spend a fortune all at once for your meat processing needs. Everything I showed you here today has been accumulated. I started out with a few boning knives and a cutting board. Then I bought the paper cutter, and I buy something every year until I get to have the equipment that I've showed you here today, and this is what I use. It gets me through all my new meat cutting needs year after year. If you have any more questions, fire away and I'll answer them in some future Q&A sessions. Well, hey everyone. I just want to give you a little update on the mouse bucket. You already know how good this thing works. In fact, it's the most productive mouse trap I've ever used. Every time I check it, there's dead mice in it. Now you probably think that we got a crazy mouse infestation here, but we really don't, because I could eradicate them entirely. I'm going to keep on catching mice because the cabin's in the woods, winter's approaching, every mouse on the mountain wants to move under the camp. It's not a good idea. So, I checked the trap about a week ago and I had 7. I just checked it the other day, I had 4 more. So I decided I'd set up the trail camera watching the mouse bucket just so I can see how the mice approach it. What I was expecting was the mice would just crawl up the ramp, look down at the seed floating in the water and jump in. It was a real eye-opener, I got to tell you. I got an education. So I want to share this with you. Look at here, the mice come up the ramp and then they were walking the rim of the bucket. Now, every one of them was doing this, but the real eye-opener was they were reaching down and hanging on by their hind feet. I mean, look at these. They're like little gymnasts. And look at this one, okay? He's only hanging on by his toenails, all right? So a lot of mice came, and whether or not they were drinking or feeding on some of the seed, I'm not really sure, but they just kept doing this over and over again. But some of them would lose their way and fall in the bucket. So it was pretty cool to see this. So I decided I need to make a few changes. And I would make a little bit of a slippery slope for them to walk on, hoping that that would improve my catch rate. And so I did that. And this is the results here. I was finding that the mice were definitely on a slippery slope, but it really didn't up the performance. So I'm going to have to take it back out and give it another go of it. Now I don't really need to make any improvements. The bucket works great simply with water and seed. You don't even need to put the little spinner in there. But I'm just having a little bit of fun. I'm going to make some improvements because this is probably what my dad would do if he had a trail camera and he was doing this. He'd be making all kinds of little contraptions. So that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm onto something with a little slippery slope, but I'm going to make it maybe twice as wide, make it more like a funnel. I'll put the camera on it, see how it performs, give you another update in the future. I gotta do the Q&A. Yes, I do. I gotta do the Q&A. Okay? And I do the Q&A all right? All right? Okay. What a good boy you are. All righty. Time for the questions of the week. Do I still bird hunt? I will take a grouse or a turkey occasionally, but I do very little bird hunting now. I used to be really big into waterfowl hunting maybe 20 years ago. It's because I trained gun dogs back then. And after my last black lab passed away, I probably went duck hunting maybe once or twice, but it just wasn't the same. She was a real crackerjack. She was my hunting partner. It just wasn't the same without her, and I haven't gone duck hunting since. What is the burn time on your Kitchen Queen? This little Kitchen Queen 380 is a fabulous stove. It'll burn all night long, but of course it depends on what you're feeding it. If all your firewood is very dry and split small, it's going to burn hot and fast. At nighttime, I'm going to go to bed. I usually put in a couple of big rounds or a couple big splits, something that's not totally dry. Dampen it down, the fire will still be burning in the morning. This cabin's 24 by 24 with rooms upstairs, and it's all we need to heat this place. It's a fantastic stove. I couldn't be happier with the stove. Okay, how noisy is your Champion generator compared to the Honda? Well, the Hondas are quieter generators, especially the little suitcase generator. Those are really quiet, but they're also twice the price. My little suitcase generator, the one that I just showed you a week or two ago that I bought, a second one, I love that thing. It's not as lightweight as the Honda. It's not as quiet as the Honda. But when you set it on the economy setting, it just goes put, 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 put. It throttles up when a load gets put on it. It's wonderful. I just don't keep it right next to the camp. I have it on a 100-foot extension cord, and it's out behind my wood pile, and the wood pile acts kind of like a sound shield, and it just sends all the sound out into the forest. It's running out there. I don't even hear it inside the camp. Are you going to plant any food plots at the New Hampshire cabin? No, I'm not. And I'll tell you why. About, 20 years or so ago, I used to read a lot of hunting magazines and reading about guys that have food plots, and I was all intrigued with that. And then when I went to New York and I bought farmland and I bought a tractor, I put in some food plots, put a lot of time and money into those things. They attracted deer. I watched deer in almost every hunt. But you know what? I don't recollect ever shooting any deer off of my food plot. It just didn't feel right for me. It wasn't thrilling for me. It seemed to take all of the challenge out of it. And the reason I bow hunt is because the greater the challenge, the sweeter the success. Okay? I kind of felt like it was Halloween. Put out all the candy and the kids are going to come in droves. You put out a food plot, the deer are going to come in droves. And it just didn't do it for me. Now, I'm certainly not knocking food plots. I feel the same about food plots as I feel about the big heated box blinds where hunters hunt in their stocking feet and watch the game and peer out the window from time to time and shoot one. It's a great way to kill deer. But you don't have to be good at anything to do that. Again, I'm not knocking it. If it works for you, that's great. Everybody needs to do what works for them. Okay? But for myself, it takes all the challenge out of the game, and I'm not into it. What works for me, like out here, okay, this is miles of forest like I've talked about. As I said before, we don't have any crops, we don't have any apple orchards, we don't even have any oak groves. The food source, like oak trees, are few and far between. To be successful, especially with a bow out here in a forest this size, you need to really do your homework. You need to really know the characteristics of the deer that you're hunting. You have to learn how to hunt the lay of the land. There's not much to funnel them anywhere here. So when you do your homework and you set up a game plan and it all works out and you score, it's very, very rewarding. Like a couple weeks ago, my cousin and I come back from New York. We took up those 5 tree stands down off of the property I'm selling. We got a couple of deer in New York while there. I came out here and I put up a tree stand. Went out, picked a spot, set up one of those ladder stands, and on the very first hunt, I got to watch 5 deer come through. And I couldn't believe it, just that I set up in the right spot. But nonetheless, here they come right at my stand. All right. I was bow hunting. I have a doe permit. All I need is one more deer for sausage and we'll be through for the year. And here they come. And it was so rewarding for me to have them come right under my stand like that. And they all passed like that. I was undetected. It was such a fabulous experience that I let them all walk. And letting them all go was actually more thrilling than taking one. The season is long. I only need one more deer. I'm pretty certain other opportunities will come along. And if not, that's okay. It was my choice to pass those up, and it was absolutely thrilling. And that's why I hunt. Yep. So, I guess that's it. All the questions are answered. That's it for now. Oh, hold on. I have a comment I just got. I love your videos, but really hate it when you say that's it for now. So, that's it for today. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and all the best to you, and God bless.
Frankie and the boss out walking in the woods, living life happy and free. Tracks in the snow everywhere they go, there's a pokey way up in that tree. A beaver built a pond where they have some fun, taking life a day at a time. Best friends until the end, Frankie and the boss, Frankie and the boss, Frankie and the boss.